My name is Martha Stitt, and I'm one of the 2424 artists. We'll see if I make it done in an hour's time. I'm a art therapist from long time ago. I was trained in Philadelphia in the first training program at Hahnemann Medical College, and have worked through the years with medical patients, psychiatric patients, physically disabled. Did a lot of work at the art studio. I was there for about 12 years working with the Discover the Artist program, and was also their clinical coordinator. So I was setting up programs at different agencies that wanted to have an art therapy program or an art therapist come in and work individually with their clients. But I always insisted I had to do some kind of direct client work and painting or some kind of art, just because it was important to me that I kept in touch with what was going on. Now that I'm sort of retired, I have more time to do some art myself. As you'll see as we go along, my studio is in the corner of what we call the library. And it's hard to get to the books because there's too much stuff in front of the books, but it's still there. And there's not a lot of space in this. And I decided, instead of going out into the living room or some other bigger space, that I would work here and let you see what it's like when you're really in a small space. And that does not always mean that I do small things. It just means that I rearrange things in order to get done what I want to get done. If we have time or a time for a little break or something, I'll show you a couple other paintings that I've done in the last couple of years. But I better get started on this because, as Christian says, the clock is ticking. So here is my canvas that I'm going to start off with. It has yellow ochre on it, which is a kind of a dark yellow color. And it's a traditional background or ground color that helps hold the paint onto the canvas that's been also gessoed. And those are two things that help the paint adhere to the canvas and hopefully will last hundreds of years, because I'm so famous. But anyway, so the next thing I'm going to do, and I have a photograph up here that I'm going to kind of try to work from, and I'm going to also ad lib from. So I'm going to start off again with a traditional kind of beginning working situation here with some typically burnt umber, and do my sketch with that. I was taught not to use a pencil because the lead will come back up through the paint. So occasionally I will use a piece of charcoal, but most of the time I will do my sketch and planning and whatever by using burnt umber and or other colors. You'll also note that I have a pretty shaky hand at this point. I'm on some medication that's causing me to have quite a bit of hand tremor. So I just decided to go with it and cope with the hand tremor. So, but some of you may know me and say, wow, she's really shaky. What's up with her? Well, no, I wasn't drinking all night. But, oh, wait a minute. This is from a photograph on a deck, and it's going to get changed around. So one of the things too I do is when I'm making a correction, I hop in and get another color. I don't like this line, so I'm going to go over here and do this line. Make it over here, maybe into here. Let it come this way. It's that perspective stuff you got to figure out.
Now, Marty, today I know we're working off of that reference photo, but where do you typically get your ideas for your artwork?
I use just about anything I can think of. And some of that depends on what I'm working on. Often I have, I'm doing some special thing for somebody that wants something done. Um, or it's very spontaneous. Several years ago here, I'll show you one thing just to get you kind of, this recently I did as um, a card for somebody's birthday for a project that I was doing in it. So it was all about food and recipes and stuff like that. So that was kind of fun. Um, this was, I'll probably have to take this off of here because you probably can't see it on there. This is a book cover for a friend of mine who's um, publishing a book, self-publishing a book, and she wanted very specific things. And so I did about 7 different images for her, and nothing. Finally, that's the one that she worked from. And then let's see. Then I'll just show you just a couple. Well, I'll show you this one. This one's easier to get out. And theoretically, may have to pull it over here. Some people may have seen this. This was in one of the Ursuline shows. This is called Topsy Turvy, and you can see, there are people going both directions, and this is a very spontaneous and just image based, but always comes back to having some connection to me, but it's not always realistic or fine lines or whatever. But I don't mind working, in any media or any kind of thing. Again, being a therapist, you have to work with all different kinds of things and be able to show people how to do things. So the more experience you have and the more willingness you are to try different things, the more you're going to be able to help people do that. And it's fun for me because, art is not easy. Everybody says, oh, art's a lot of fun. Well, art's a lot of work. It takes hours to paint things or draw things or pen and ink, or you get almost all the way done and your ink spills and you have to start all over again. And, you learn that stuff in art school, but you also learn it again and again as you go along. Is, gosh, that looks horrible. Maybe I'll end up totally changing even what I'm doing here today, but that's where I'm starting. But it just comes about. So I'm trying to paint this particular painting. I'm going to add lemon and add different kinds of other things, I hope, to it, to make it interesting for somebody else. To me, it's okay right now. It's not the greatest photograph in the world, but it can have all kinds of things that are interesting in it, and that keeps my interest up. So hope that clear. I don't know. Do you have any other questions about that?
No, that was a beautiful explanation. Thank you.
Yeah. I don't mind answering questions as long as I know what to say. So now comes the hard part, or the work part here. That's all the painting. This is just the beginning. This is the part that has to get together here. Oh, and I might as well show everybody, since I'm in the process of talking about this. Is my palette. This is a basic old egg carton from someplace. Don't use a paper one because it won't work. This is a styrofoam one. And I put, of course, my paint up here in the thing, and then use this as a mixing tray, and then use other things as mixing trays also. Things like food containers from the takeout store, and meat trays or grape trays or whatever, because they're very convenient. They work really well, and you can, you don't have to worry about them. You don't have to spend a lot of money to get them. They just are around. And instead of throwing them out, you say, oh, all right, I'll use that. The egg cartons I use because, again, they're very convenient. I've used them for months at a time. Sometimes you have to take out dried paint or whatever. You have to spray it with water to keep it happy. And I see my tripod's gonna not stand up here too good. And you can, if it gets dried, you can scrape out some of the paint. There is a point you have to say, okay, that one's gone, I'm going to get a new one. But often there's, even if there, you have to throw it out, there's paint in there that's nice and soft, and you can scrape it out and put it in your new one, and it'll work just fine. So I just thought I'd show you that, because people think, oh, a professional artist, you have to have a really good palette. No, I don't think I've ever had a really good palette. Even in this little small studio, you don't have to have a big studio. You can work in lots of kinds of places. When I was a poor artist and I lived in Philadelphia and I was doing stone sculpture, don't ask me why, but anyway, something I was interested in. I had no place to do it, and I didn't want, I lived in a one-room kind of studio apartment, and there was no place to do stone carving. So I used the shower and covered up the drain and whatever, but it was great because you could go sit in the shower on a milk carton or something, or a chair, and stone carve, and all the dust and the dirt and the pieces would end up right where you wanted them to be, swept up and cleaned up, and then you just turn the shower on and let the rest of it go down. The dusty part, the little tiny pieces, dust and stuff would go down the drain, and you'd be all set. And it worked really well, and everybody thinks I'm crazy, but it worked really well. So those are fun things that you never would have thought of if you'd said, well, where are you going to stone carve? Well, that's what mother invention came up with that one. All right, easel adjustment here. Okay, maybe that'll be better. Ah, yes, works better. There's a good example of what you didn't want to happen. So it runs, so you just clean it up. Get on with it. You're going to paint over it anyway, so don't worry about it if it happens. Just turn it into something else that's going on.
Alrighty, so we come right about our halfway mark. I was thinking that as an artist, I often get a lot of inspiration from other artists. What other
Yeah.
artists do you admire or get inspiration from?
Well, I guess those interested in at that time. Um, whoever's that I'm seeing a show at the museum, or uh, somebody else is using somebody's style or just got a new book or something. And I think those are the things that kind of propel me to look further and kind of explore, sometimes looking at that technique or seeing if the technique I was using was kind of similar to so-and-so's. I don't think I started off really liking Van Gogh because my grandfather had a print of a painting, um, of Van Gogh's, and I was always fascinated. I used to lay in sort of sit in a chair in his den and just look at that painting and think, wow, isn't that cool? I wonder where that is, and why he painted it and stuff. And never really thought about being an artist myself, but um, that was always an influence in me. And of course, as everyone begins to learn about Van Gogh, you get more fascinated with his life struggle, and how we don't look as much at his painting technique or whatever, but he was a very interesting painter. Um, I did grow up in a house full of painters and artists and whatever. My dad was an architect, and he loved to also paint. He loved to do watercolors and stuff. Usually only when he had time on vacation. And my mother was also a painter, and she taught at the Cleveland Museum of Art in the education program for a long time. And my brother ended up being an architect himself, and then I went on to art school, and then went on to graduate school for the art therapy program, which I never even knew about at the time when I started. So, or when I started art school anyway, there was no such thing as art therapy. That was a training program. So um, it's been an interesting life, but certainly was influenced by my family, and a little challenging being the last one of the group to learn how to do art and stuff. And it just always was. I never thought I could do it as good as anybody else, but that took a while to get over that one. So, because they were all, more years of advanced art than I was no matter how old I was at the time. So, but got over that. So, and my parents' art was always up on the walls too, so that was always an influence, I guess, too. Seeing pictures where they'd been or traveled to or whatever was part of, that just their interest in what they did. And my dad did a lot of photography and had a darkroom in the house. So there were times when you couldn't take a shower because the tub was full of prints and things were drying all over the place and whatever. So it was interesting, And I guess that was, again, one of my bigger inspirations or whatever. So, yeah. Halfway done, huh? No, I'm not halfway done, but I'm working on it here. This is why I said that art is a lot of work. Say, well, you spent a whole hour and all you did was get the background colors in. Now, why did it take you so long? Oh, that's just the way it is. And it also always looks different when it dries. And you say, oh, I didn't really want that color. But look how it dried differently. So you kind of get used to it and know what it's going to do, but sometimes you just don't quite get it on there. So color change the way you want it.
It's been about 45 minutes together, and it's been a wonderful glimpse into your creative process. I know earlier you're mentioning really a kind of a very rich history with art. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about how your art process has changed over time?
Um, my art process changing. Well, I think I've just gotten more confident doing it, and one of the things that really helped was when I was being an art therapist before I came back to Cleveland and worked at the studio. Most of what I did was allow people to be self-expressive. When I took the job at the studio, um, it was really more to teach people how to do art. And I was never taught how to teach people how to do art, but I said, oh, well, I know how to do art. I'll just teach them the way I know, which had its pros and cons for a while, but I began to figure it out and basically began teaching people really basic kinds of things that I was taught in art school. And it took a while for me to feel comfortable doing that, but gradually I began to say, oh, okay, I got this now. Um, and and began to really enjoy it as I saw people really begin um, to take those skills that I was teaching them, whether they were very fundamental or they were very creative and free, and really began to see them say, I was at a traffic light the other day, but I forgot to drive ahead because I was too busy looking at the trees or the clouds or the shadows or something. And then I knew people were getting hooked on doing art, because art is really not what you think it is. It's what you see. Well, it can be what you think it is too, but a lot of times in order to learn how to be an artist, you have to learn how to draw certain kinds or paint certain kinds of things. And people don't understand shadows and how important shadows are, or whatever else is kind of happening in the world. That's how you begin to learn those basic skills. So when people began to let me know that they were not driving ahead, but they were spending all their time, that 30 seconds or that 2 minutes looking at how the sky was, or how something else was growing, that really kind of got me. So I began to get some real confidence that I was on the right track and people were enjoying it and learning. And then you began to watch them begin to say, well, I don't like that color. I'm going to change that color, or I'm going to do this and combine that with this thing. And there are a lot of people that still can't do that. They always want a photograph to work from or something. Well, that's all right. That gives you a beginning point, just like I'm working from a photograph, which is one of the reasons I decided to do this today, was just to show that you can take a photograph, but you also can change it and make it work for what you want it to do. And that's when it really gets to be fun, both the painting part, but also teaching people or getting them involved in that expressive part, was always fun. I also used to do things like not let people paint what they wanted. You can ask anybody in my classes, they'll tell you, but I would say, okay, pick out 3 of these colors, and there'd be 6 colors. And you'd get black and white or something else, and those 3 colors. And I want you to paint this full color picture of, Monet's gardens or whatever. And they would all yell and scream and carry on, and we can't do this, and this isn't going to work. And how can you make us do this? It's terrible and torturous and whatever. And then they began to figure out that, in fact, that's how you learn how to do some of that stuff, is by just trying out something really different. And that was fun. They ended up learning a lot of stuff. And I learned how to take a lot of criticism from some of my folks. Oh, you're a terrible person. You made me do. And they'd always inevitably put them up in the art show and say, and have to explain to their families about what they were doing. But they said, well, that's my favorite picture. Whatever. So some of those things were really both wonderful for them, but also a confidence builder for me. And I really enjoyed working with folks and in those kinds of ways, to just let that begin to be the process that they go through of challenging them to go beyond what they usually do, which is what always people want to do. Once you learn something, you always want to just kind of continue it. And but you don't grow that way. You have to expand what you're doing, and challenge yourself, whether it's you or the teacher. That's what teachers do, is challenge you. They teach you stuff, but then they challenge you to go further. You don't always want to do it, but in the end, you say, "Oh yeah, that's why they taught me that," or "Look how that came out. I didn't think that was going to come out that way." So I I consider that fun. So, and I did a lot of other kinds of media too in my Discover the Artist classes. I did a lot of collage stuff. I did drawing stuff. I always like to teach people how to paint first. If they've never done any kind of art and they come in, they say, "Well, I want to learn how to do art. I want to learn how to draw." No, you're not going to start off drawing. You're going to start off painting. I think it's much easier to teach people how to paint than it is how to draw. And I could go into why that's true, but maybe too long a story for today. I don't know. I'm truly trying to adjust some of the colors to make it so they work well together, and they kind of are still showing what I'm trying to create. Like I'm trying to do a bird bath here, and is it the color adjusted right? Is it the right shape? I do want to go back and kind of tidy up some of these plant pots, and um, and add in some more detail on the plants themselves, or other things that might be around. And again, add some detail in. Obviously, um, there's some stakes or strips that go across here to make the fence that is around this particular deck scene. Um, but it takes a little bit of time to kind of sketch in all this other stuff, and then begin to go back when it's dry a little bit more, although acrylic paint dries pretty quickly. But to really begin to kind of get some of that interesting detail that you always look for in a painting. That you don't have to have detail, but you have to have something that kind of sparks it off, and gives you that kind of feeling of, oh, I'm there. I'm sitting on that deck, or I'm in that spot, and it's really what I want it to be, and that's not at all what I want it to be. Come here, Pete, get out there. And I could let it dry and pull that off and then paint over it, but I don't like to do that. Sometimes it's just simpler to take it off or repaint it right away, because it was too dark. And again, that time is clicking here, and I need to get on with it, getting it kind of fitted in here right.
Marty, as we get to our last 5 minutes together here, you've spoken a couple times about your history with the art therapy studio
Right.
and the Discover the Artist classes that you've done. For those that might be watching that aren't very familiar with the work that's done there, can you speak a little bit about what the art therapy studio does?
Art Therapy Studio is a very interesting and unique place. It has always worked with people with some kind of disability, usually or at least beginning with a physical disability, but certainly um, emotional problems and things also come into play, whether you're physically ill or you just have some kind of a mental illness or some other kind of problem that's affecting your life in a negative kind of way. And even many of the people that I worked with didn't come in with any identified problem, but later on they came out that, oh, they were mourning the loss of somebody, or there was something else happening in their life that they hadn't really acknowledged, but that was there, and they couldn't talk about it with their family or whatever. And so it gave them either a safe place just to develop some friendships or kinds of things, or um, it also um, encourage them to maybe seek more specific help about a specific problem or something that was going on. But the art is the way the art studio's approach has always been through the art. It's not talking about the problem. It's it's doing art, and art can allow it to come out on its own, or it just begins to release the tension or something that's going on in the person, and then they begin to paint about it or draw about it, or maybe in fact again talk some about it, maybe with their peers in the class, or something, or somebody else. They find somebody to go out and have coffee with after the class each Thursday or whatever, and began to really develop some really close friendships that really help them um, uh, begin to come to grips with whatever was going on in their life. So there's a lot of ways that that art does, but often just doing the artwork. And everybody says, oh, we have to talk about the art. Well, you do some, but you also don't. Sometimes you don't want about it. Maybe somebody was recently traumatized by something. Even the pandemic right now is causing a lot of stress in people. Well, sometimes it doesn't do any good to talk about that stress or that particular problem, because all it does is make more stress. Um, so it by doing the art, though, it takes you away from all that stress and allows you to begin to kind of go in a different direction. So I find that very, and I was really trained as more an art psychotherapist, where I was really using the art to be specifically expressive about, well, what was it like when your father came at you with a knife, or, when your mother did such and such, or, you were criticized at school and bullied and you didn't know what was happening, and how did you cope with it? And I was really trained very Freudianly to work with that um, kind of situation. But when I got in the studio, I had to say, oh, these people work differently. What is their philosophy? So I had to learn a lot of stuff from Dr. Streeter and Mickey McGraw and other people, of course, at the studio. But um, it took me a while to understand it and watch it work. But once I did, I said, oh, okay, these guys have got it too. They're both ways to work, and both of them are fine to do. And they have different purposes. A lot of people in the community think that we are just art ladies or craft ladies or something. And, oh, would you do the Christmas decorations? Or would you do the Jewish holiday decorations? Or would you do this or that for Halloween? No, I'm not doing that. That's not what I'm here. I'm not the activity lady. I'm an art therapist. And they again would furrow their brows and say, well, I told you to go do Thanksgiving turkeys or whatever. And you'd say, nope, sorry. Unless you could work it in some way so that it would work out in a way that would be helpful for the clients, then I wouldn't do it. Took me a while to do also